Who is driving transport policy in the north? A new regional devolution deal leaves questions unanswered, and yesterday a House of Commons Select Committee failed to find answers. I'm David Thame, Analysis Editor at Place North. In today's Place podcast, we'll try to find out who's in the driving seat for northern transport policy. We'll also sample a slightly tense mood in the Manchester office market and ask if this week's budget is likely to mean value for money regeneration spending. Woodchurch in Wirral, Carmill in St Helens and Daresbury in Halton are lined up for new Merseyrail stations by Liverpool City Region Mayor Steve Rotheram. Rotheram announced the new stations days after Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove gave final approval to new Level 4 devolution deals for his own city region, West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire. The bulk of those deals are about who runs transport. In the last few days, ministers published a technical paper on how the transport elements of the devolution deal will work. The aim is that each region has a single transport funding settlement. There'll be some more wiggle room for funding bus services and introducing zero-emission buses, some more oomph on integrated ticketing, some thoughts on local key road routes and how they are maintained to improve traffic flow and reduce congestion, some more leeway on taxis and private hire, and encouragement to deal with pavement parking. These are all things most people would assume local councils can do already, but actually they can't. The big test, though, is going to be rail, as the government's Level 4 offer documents concede property development around new or growing railway stations is a huge economic opportunity. Everything in the deal turns on a new partnership between city region mayors and Great British Railways, with the aim of supporting, quote, identification of worthwhile opportunities for regeneration, commercial and housing development in and around rail stations. The establishment of Great British Railways, the document goes on, creates an opportunity to increase commercial income, and the local responsibilities of the eligible institutions will help to realise this. All of which is dandy, the only problem being that Great British Railways doesn't yet exist. The details are all very yes, Minister. The idea was floated in May 2021, and last year Derby was chosen for the HQ. A draft bill was published a few weeks ago that would, if it one day turned into a real bill, and that turned into an act, create Great British Railways. And so far, that's it. Except that the non-existent body with no start date already has 200 staff and, if newspaper reports are to be believed, will soon have a highly paid chief executive. The mood on rail infrastructure is already poor, thanks to the cancellation of the high-speed 2 rail line north of Birmingham. There's also problems with Northern Powerhouse Rail. Last month, the Northern Powerhouse Partnership was fuming about the failure of the government to commit to the 7.5 miles or so of tunnel between Manchester Airport and the city centre, which was planned for HS2, but is also needed for the Trans-Pennine Northern Powerhouse Rail. Now, in theory, Transport for the North, who have an oversight role on Northern Powerhouse Rail, ought to be the answer to who is in charge, or Transport for the North are in charge. But in practice, as the fates of High Speed 2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail show, it doesn't have much influence. It's not just the North that has these problems. It may bring you some comfort to know that there's similar unhappiness bubbling away in the South, where the economics of a £6-7 billion rail line between Oxford and Cambridge are also in doubt. We're all waiting for November this year, when the National Audit Office is due to publish a blockbuster report into how the UK does its railway thinking, and this will include a look at the non-existent Great British Railways. It's sure to be a gripping read. Yesterday, the House of Commons Transport Committee had a go at working out who was in charge of strategic transport policy. Members quizzed Dame Bernadette Kelly, the Chief Civil Servant at the Department for Transport, and Will Garton, who is Director of Levelling Up in Michael Gove's department. Garton was asked how we incentivise development around railway stations. He said work is ongoing. He was then asked, is the economic uplift of that development being included in the business case for new railway schemes? At which point the civil servants began to squirm. Is that an unfair word? Anyway, they admitted these were good points and maybe some technical work had been done, said Kelly. But the answer was scarcely encouraging if you'd like to see transport policy turn into new development and economic growth. The difficulty, Dame Bernadette confessed, was that the business case methodology the Department of Transport uses to make rail investment decisions, quote, is not good at capturing long-term strategic benefits, end quote. MPs mildly suggested that maybe this way of doing it wasn't fit for purpose, particularly for projects outside London. We do need better ways to measure transformational benefits, she conceded. Garton agreed they could probably do better if they could find metrics that worked. It's hard to do it in a technically accurate way, he added. It all sounded very Sir Humphrey and not very urgent. If anyone is in the driving seat of UK rail policy, they weren't at that meeting. And now your weekly rundown of what's going up and what's heading the other way in the Place North elevator. Doors closing, going down. The budget has been delivered. The analysis begun. Will any of it make a difference to levelling up or prosperity and property development in the North's towns and cities? Value for money watchdogs have been saying for years that the answer is no, it probably won't. This week, as we digest Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's announcement, the government is launching a search for a partner in its efforts to work out whether the £2.6 billion UK Shared Prosperity Fund has so far made any measurable difference. If you fancy pitching for it, the stack of bulky paperwork is to be found on the Levelling Up Department's website. A glimpse into the difficulties you'd be taking on is provided by an invitation issued earlier this year, January, to evaluate the impact of the £3.6 billion Towns Fund. A preliminary look at the problems revealed 3 astonishing things which make the whole exercise feel like a pretty much guaranteed waste of time. These are, first, the risk that it's, quote, impossible to find statistically significant short-term outcomes, close quotes, that, quote, the benefits attributable to the Towns Fund may be impossible to fully separate from other initiatives, close quotes, and that the timing of the study means it, quote, might not be able to detect statistically significant changes in the long-term impacts of the Towns Fund, supposing, of course, the other 2 caveats mean there are any impacts. The 45 northern towns in receipt of Towns Fund money include Wakefield, Middlesbrough and Darwin, and we must hope they get some benefits. Another piece of the old regime at Manchester Town Hall is on the way out, if the 2 people involved, Julie and David Roscoe, will forgive the use of the expression. The pair have been respectively Director and Deputy Director of Planning at Manchester City Council for more or less ever, and after 50 years in the Town Hall, they'll move to shorter working hours from April as part of a phased succession plan. Although decades in the job left some property noses out of joint, most temporarily, a few permanently, the Roscoes won deserved plaudits for being commercially aware and property market savvy. The balance of supply and demand now and in the future was never far from their minds nor their reports to council committees. They step back as the City Council ponders a new economic strategy which appears to head in a different direction. It turns on a Resolution Foundation thought experiment about what kind of office space you'd need if you wanted to retain the same proportion of graduates as London retains. The office market is nervy about this, not just because Manchester isn't London in all kinds of ways, but because it would mean consenting several times more office space than the office market has ever managed to absorb. Expressions like flood the market and do not make commercial sense are whispered by the kind of people who are usually the Town Hall's firm and unapologetic friends. So it's an anxious context for the Roscoe's departure. That's it for this week. We've seen how there might not be anyone in the strategic driving seat for Northern Transport, how a changing of the guard at Manchester Town Hall has come at a nervy moment for the office market, and how hard it is to work out if regeneration spending is any use at all. For more about the built environment in the North, visit placenorth.co.uk. I'm David Thame, and thank you for listening.